certainly we're happy to be here. Plant Moran is to help sponsor the annual meeting. I know it was branded at one time the most fun you'll ever have at an annual meeting. Well, today is the most fun you'll ever have at an annual meeting at a luncheon on a Friday afternoon with an open bar. So, all right, well done. But 40 years, wow, congratulations certainly to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. 40 years of conversation, communication, and relevance. In other words, these weekly forums that we have and special programs certainly present a part of our community that makes us different from others, and that is a willingness to collaborate and a willingness to communicate and to have conversations about issues that affect our business community, our public sector, our social enterprises, our arts and entertainment. And CMC is at the forefront of what we do in terms of hosting that conversation and making sure that we bring things to light that help to make us successful. Congratulations, Jane and team. We love you. You do a great job. Thank you. So as we continue to grow as a community and as the Columbus Metropolitan Club has continued to grow with our new venue here and the beautiful view of the city, certainly I think one of the things we're going to celebrate today is the best of Columbus in stories that define us. I have the unique perspective, whether it's at Plant Moran or Experience Columbus or the Jazz Arts Group or the Salvation Army, a number of different venues in terms of which I get to participate. And it's both an honor and a privilege and humbling to be able to do that. And today we have a panel that's going to tell us about the best of us, the best of Columbus. You have bios within your forum brochures, and we're not going to read through all of those, but we will do a brief introduction. First up, from the City of Columbus, Chief of Staff for External Affairs, Dawn Tyler Lee. Next, former U.S. Congresswoman, who is Senior Policy Advisor for Ice Miller Whiteboard, LLC, Deborah Pryce. One of Columbus's best-known real estate developers, Robert Weiler. I like that shout out. Well done. Our Ohio House of Representatives, District 17, Mike Curtin. And then to lead our discussion today, we have the journalist from the Columbus Dispatch, Tim Feran. Please help me welcome our panelists, and Tim, take it away. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're celebrating 40 years of the Columbus Metropolitan Club, and we've looked at the theme, the best of Columbus. We've talked about the life of the city, how it's changed and grown, and gone from a overgrown small town to a small big city to today's really fairly diverse, thriving metropolis. So today's panel, we chose with the idea that these folks epitomize something, some aspect of Columbus, and we'd like to think that the stories they tell are going to be quite familiar to you, not just because you've been reading about them in the program, but because as they talk about themselves and about the city, you're going to recognize yourself in one of them or several of them. So let's start with Deb Pryce, who actually, you weren't born in Columbus.
No, I was not. I was born in Warren, Ohio, which is Trumbull County, up near Youngstown.
And so why did you come? Why did you stay?
Well, I came to Columbus, like so many do, to go to the Ohio State University, and that was way back when. And when I start telling my story, as you realize how far back it was. But I didn't grow up here, but I really did grow up here. I came in 1969 as I graduated from high school as a brand new student and was on the Ohio State campus in the spring of '70 with the campus riots, and I got my first whiff of tear gas, and I saw demonstrations and bra burnings and everything that many people in this room probably don't remember ever having had experienced. But if you think things are really bad right now, those of us who can remember back to the 60s and early 70s, political times were kind of shaky then too. But that was my first introduction to Columbus, Ohio State was, and I was from a very, very small high school, and I came to Cowtown, but I thought it was Paris. It was wonderful. It was like a whole different world to me.
Paris with tear gas.
With tear gas, well, you know, but it was an eye-opening experience for a young woman who went to high school. My graduating class was about 45 people. It was all white industrial town in Northeast Ohio, and this was the biggest eye-opener I ever had. My parents, of course, tried to protect me from all the evil I could experience here and wanted me to go to a small Presbyterian school, but as students are wont to be, we don't always follow our parents' best advice, and I found myself here, and I will never leave.
And you were mentioning at lunch to Mike that, in fact, everybody back in Warren has followed you down.
That's right. I'm the oldest of 5 children, and one at a time, they all followed the path to Columbus, Ohio. So I'm a trailblazer for my family. Eventually, both my parents moved here too, and so they would come here to visit. And I don't know if it's just all everything's comparable, but compared to where I grew up, it's a beautiful place, and all my family believed that to be true. And they saw all the bright possibilities in Columbus, and they saw the steady leadership and the potential for growth, and the just the environment was so different from just up the road 2.5 hours.
So the bright possibilities. Bob, you're a native. Did you see
right.
the bright possibilities? Were you inspired? Did you have a vision of...
I saw them from the day I was born. My life experience is going to be pretty boring next to yours, Deb. I was born here in Columbus. Actually, my parents, both college grads. I was lucky enough to be born in Bexley, grew up there, and went to college out to Arizona. I had a little asthma, and they had real estate as a major. I wasn't smart enough to get into Dartmouth, where Alan, my brother, went to school. And then my dad had a real estate company that he had started back in 1938, and I knew early on that that's what I wanted to do, partly because as we were little kids growing up, my dad and his partner were building homes on the east side, and on weekends we would go through those houses, and that seemed to be a lot of fun, and so the path was already cleared for me.
So it was always going to be a fun thing to go after.
It has been.
Dawn, you weren't born in Columbus either, but you might as well have been. You came to town at age 3?
3, yes. I was actually born in Wilmington, Delaware. My parents are from the East Coast, my mom from New Jersey and my dad from Pennsylvania. And so when I was 3, I sat them down and I said, we need to move to Columbus. And so that's how we ended up here.
You knew even
because
then.
I saw the bright possibilities from Delaware that we needed to go to Columbus. So here I am. I grew up here in this town, went away for undergraduate to Hampton University in Virginia, and then went to graduate school at University of Delaware, so very coincidentally returned back to the state where I was born. And because I'm among friends, I can be honest, after grad school, coming back to Columbus was not on the top of my list. I really wanted to stay on the East Coast. A lot of my friends from undergrad were up and down the East Coast, and I thought that I would build my career and my life in that area of the country. But Bill Faith, who many of you know, who is the president and CEO of COHIO, the Coalition on Homelessness and Housing in Ohio, offered me a job here in Columbus, and I turned it down. And knowing Bill, he was very persistent, and so being back into Columbus, I have him to credit for that, and I'm so glad to be here. It's been a great journey.
Michael?
Born and raised. Deborah and I are contemporaries. I was born in 1951, 4th out of 5 kids in a traditional Irish Catholic, very democratic-leaning family. If you were born in 51 into an Irish family, your chances were about 90% you were going to be in a Democratic family back then. JFK was a huge deal. I was in the 4th grade when JFK was running for president in 1960, and that was humongous. At St. Christopher Elementary School, where I went for 8 years, there was one kid who was for Nixon, had the audacity to wear a Nixon button to school, and so he very appropriately got beaten up that day. Remember my mom taking me down to Capitol Square to see JFK on the west side of the State House, and it was wall-to-wall people from Broad to State, and from the steps to the Neal House. You couldn't move, so I guess if I got a political bug, it was early on. So 12 years of Catholic schools, St. Christopher Elementary, and then Bishop Watterson. So a lot of what is right and wrong with me is basically an outgrowth of that Catholic upbringing. And I credit my mom, and I guess I have to credit a bunch of nuns, you know, because back then nuns ruled the world.
I'm Catholic too. I know the nuns. Yes.
And they beat my brother Bobby and me into being responsible citizens.
The yard ruler would keep you in line.
Well, they had many ways to keep you in line.
Oh, yes. So we have 2 men and 2 women on this panel, and one of the things I observed when I came to town, I'm from Cleveland originally, this is in '89, Columbus at that point was very, very much a boys' club. It was led by men, run by men, and yet we have 2 very accomplished women here on the panel. How has it changed for you? How difficult was it for you to get?
Well, I can't say it was easy, but I think that the hardest thing women have to do is overcome what's inside themselves to get involved. I think people that went before me, you know, those bra burners and all the others that, you know, led the feminist movement, and now you say feminism, it's sort of like a dirty word, but they really were true revolutionaries in terms of where we are today. And so I think we often fail to realize that the younger women especially, who don't remember some of the challenges that women faced in the past, don't give credit where credit's due. But it still exists. I mean, we came in today to get ready for our speeches, and they had these chairs that were this high. And I said, I can't sit up there. My legs are dangling down. And so just the smallest things, like how the seating is arranged. And so the Metropolitan Club was kind enough to replace them with shorter chairs with the ladies with the dresses on. And but Columbus has been, I think, a leader in opening doors for women. Much of the credit, I give much of my credit to males that have been encouraging me in my life. Most importantly, I think Greg Lashuka, one of my first bosses, he was a huge promoter of women in his office. He gave me leadership jobs I had no concept that I was capable of doing. And he prompted me to get involved in politics. Joanne Davidson is another person. She's not a male, obviously, but who is a trendsetter and a leader in terms of what women can accomplish. When you see it, you know you can do it yourself. And those 2 people have been real mentors to me. Greg got me started, and Joanne kept me going. And I think that the world is, all aspects of the world are open to women now, and we just need to overcome whatever's inside us that keeps us from going out and getting it.
So Dawn, you missed the tear gas and the revolution, but what do you think about the progress of women in Columbus?
Well, I certainly don't take for granted what women before me have gone through. I've had access to opportunity because of women like Congresswoman Pryce and Janet Jackson and Joyce Beatty and Kathy Espy, and the list goes on. And so I never want to take that for granted. I also want to make sure that I'm providing opportunities for women who are coming behind me to have access and opportunity. So as a community, we've certainly come a long way as it relates to women and people of color being around tables, but we still have a long way to go. And I'm excited by some of the efforts that are happening in our city currently to continue to help move that needle forward. Many of you have probably heard of the Women's Commission that First Lady Shannon Ginther is forming, so that we can have a space to talk about issues that impact women, like pay equity And that's what I really like about Columbus. We're a community that recognizes that there's a need, and we work together to meet that need. I'd like to also mention that Mayor Ginther has the highest number of women in his cabinet than has ever been in the history of Columbus, and so I'm very proud of that as well, that throughout the city of Columbus, the local government entity, the city of Columbus, that women are in leadership roles, and our mayor recognizes that as being important.
Absolutely. Bob, you're itching to jump in.
I want to say that younger folks here will have trouble believing that the Columbus Board of Realtors, in which I've been a member for a long time, and proud to say my dad was president back in the 1950s. Would you believe in the 1950s, women were not allowed in the Board of Realtors, nor those of color. And as we were saying today, the women have taken over the board almost, especially in the residential section.
Let's not forget the CMC was founded by women.
And the point is that, you know, we have come a long way. I'm not saying we're there yet, but certainly come a long way. And I just had a flashback here. I get those from time to time at my age. And at the University Club, those of you who remember the University Club, and I can remember Artie Isaac, who's almost a relative of ours, senior, standing up and saying, and this was a time no women at the University Club, and he stood up and said, you know, my son is a member of this club. My two daughters cannot be a member. There's something wrong. And they took a vote, and by a very narrow margin, it was voted down. You could not have women at the University Club. The University Club is no longer around, which is probably a good thing. But actually, and in their defense, the next year or two later, they did vote. But I will just say this, a lot of times those votes weren't because of the kindness of the heart, but because of economic reasons. They didn't have a choice. Sure. They wanted to stay in business. But, you know, I'm pleased that that's in our past.
Mike, did you have any thoughts on that?
I'm thinking 1969, Deborah and I graduated from high school, and then there were no organized sports for girls.
Pre-Title IX, that's right.
That was way pre-Title IX. I mean, there was some intramural stuff for girls, but in basketball, it was half-court ball. They weren't allowed to cross the half-court line. It was 3 on this side because they presumably didn't have the endurance, you know, right, to engage in those types of sports. And I mean, today you
they
look
can
at
have babies, but they can't. Have
yeah.
endurance.
So one of my fondest pastime is umpiring ball. I umpire high school baseball and fast pitch softball, spring, summer, and fall, and it just warms my heart. One, that my daughter could play ball when she was in high school, all sorts of different ball, and I'm out there damn near every night and every weekend umpiring ball games and doing the boys and doing the girls and seeing that some of the best ball I see out there is on these fast pitch softball teams with incredible talent, and the world has changed just in one generation. Big time.
Title IX.
Title IX. There you go. Person, place, or thing. What to you is the best part of Columbus? Deb, you want to start that one?
The best part.
Put you on the spot.
You are putting me on the spot. No, there's, I don't know if there's any best part. I think the best new part is the Scioto Mile. I love that. That's just a wonderful addition. You know, some of the things that the best part is that, you know, some things change in this community, but some things remain the same. We're still winning national championships. You know, Ohio State University is always going to be a jewel in this community forever and ever. It's been a steady diamond in our rough as we continue to grow. It continues to grow. But I think that that's probably one of my favorites. I got my start here, and I'll always consider it, you know, in my heart as kind of my first home in Columbus.
So, Bob, you can include something that you have developed, if you want.
Something I've developed. Now, I will say this, though. What I think is really nice and fun is seeing the young people, particularly, moving back downtown. And when we were growing up, downtown was thriving, but it was thriving mainly because we had Lazarus Department Store. those of you remember Town and High, and it was the most dominant retail store in the country in terms of market share. And before they'd open at 9 o'clock, the lines would be all the way around the corner, but downtown was thriving. And then, we went through that spell where not only did Lazarus leave, but all the other retailers left, restaurants closed, and now it's coming back. So the way I look at it, Tim, I think downtown is now getting a new vitality. So to me, being in the real estate business, I love to be able to look out our window. We're right at the corner of Broad and High. When I'm not too busy, I count buses coming down the street, and they have people on them now. So that's good.
What a change,
Yeah,
huh?
that's right.
Person, place, or thing, best of Columbus to you, Dawn.
I'll answer that in just a moment, but Dr.
Yeah.
Weiler reminded me of a fond memory when I was growing up, and that was downtown Lazarus. And going and having breakfast with Santa every year and being able to go in the secret shopping area to buy presents for my parents for Christmas with the money my mom gave me because I didn't have my own. But downtown Lazarus holds a lot of fond memories for me. But person, place, or thing, I have to cheat and pick two, so I'll pick person and place. And what I love the most about Columbus are its people. I mean, we have such a rich community with so much diversity, and quite frankly, even though I have grown up in Columbus and feel like I know the city pretty well, I'm still learning about new groups and new areas of town and new cultures, and so I like that richness that we have in Columbus of all different kinds of people. And then in terms of place, I'd like to pick kind of independent restaurants. I eat quite a bit in restaurants. And I know a lot of restaurants, and I take for granted how many independent restaurants we have here in town until I go to another city. And I was recently visiting a friend in another city, and we were talking about going out to dinner, and she named the possibilities, and they were all chains. And nothing against chains, because my husband's a franchisee, we love chains. But I realized in Columbus we're very unique in that there's so much diversity in our restaurants, and so I really like that about our town.
I made a career out of stating the obvious, so I'm going to state the obvious. First of all, the nuns taught me how to write a simple declarative sentence, so I made a career out of writing simple declarative sentences to state the obvious. And the obvious is that the two best places that made the most difference over the course of Columbus history were the state capitol, the fact that we have the seat of state government, and Ohio State University. Those two anchors, those two engines, if you will, guaranteed that we would constantly attract the Deb Pryces of the world, the Don Tyler Lees of the world. They were constantly churning, bringing people, as magnets to our community, new blood, bright people, people who wanted to make a difference, people who wanted to improve not only their lives, but the community that they were now in. And so if you want to say, why did Columbus become a much more progressive, much more inclusive, much more forward-looking city than so many of our counterparts in Ohio and across the Midwest? It's because of the Ohio State University and the state capitol. That's my obvious sentence for the day.
Was there a person who was the biggest influence on you, Mike?
Well, this will sound cliche-ish, but it was my mom, far and away. She was maybe the most brilliant person I ever met, top of her class from kindergarten through Ohio State, 1943 graduate of the Ohio State University College of Pharmacy. Unfortunately, I inherited my dad's brain and not my mom's. It's been a disabling characteristic for a long, long time. But she pointed me toward journalism. She could spot that I couldn't do algebra or geometry, but I could read and write. And so she pointed me in that direction. She held the family together. My dad went through a lot of difficulties, severe depression, electroshock therapy. I mean, the really heavy-duty stuff back in the day. And Mom held the family of 5 together and worked as a working pharmacist in the Grandview area, kept everything together, and was the monitor around the dining room table to make sure we got our homework done, and whether it was French or chemistry or algebra or whatnot, I mean, she could lead you to the answers. And without her, I'd be in prison today.
I think the nuns drilled a little too much humility into you. Bob, you're aching to say something about influences.
No, but I'm just thinking as Mike was talking, if you want to really have a dream, can you imagine Deborah Pryce and Mike Curtin running for the highest office. Wouldn't that be great?
We keep it civil.
I'm Tim Feran, and I approve of that message.
You approve of the message. The only problem is cable news would have nothing to talk about because there'd be no anger, no meanness or anything. When I think about Columbus, of course, my family, and I've got my family here, both business and personal, but as far as Columbus is concerned, I want to go back to 1978, and I think that was the real seminal decision that was made by Nationwide Insurance, who, as far as the development of Columbus, who were located at 899 East Broad Street. And Dean Jeffers, who was the president, thank you, Michael, who's our historian, for reminding me, along with John Galbraith, who was the consultant for Nationwide, made the decision to go to North High Street, downtown. And if you really want a nightmare, think about what downtown would be had Nationwide decided to go to the suburbs, as many of our fine companies are. You know, Cardinal Health's out in Dublin, and Wendy's, and Worthington Industries, Limited's out in the Northeast. Thank goodness Chase came to Polaris. But had Nationwide also gone north, and the reason I say this about Nationwide, and I, by the way, have no interest in their company other than their business partner, but but
that would be an interest.
When Nationwide decided to go on High Street, that was the catalyst for the convention center, which, as you know, has the walkway, and then Battelle, thanks to Judge Metcalf, who said that they had to divest $75 million of their profits from Xerox to go into the convention center. Downtown would not be what it is today, but for the fact that Nationwide made that decision, and thank goodness they did. And then the arena followed, and then the entire development that filled in. And as Mike said, from the Capitol, which is the mainstay downtown, to Ohio State, is all filling in now. Short North, which was a place you did not want to invest, is now the hottest area. But I think it all goes back to that decision to stay downtown rather than go to the suburbs. So as a downtown guy, I'm just very grateful that Nationwide came downtown.
Dawn, was there a particular person who was the key influence on you?
There's no way that I can just pick one person, but certainly my parents, and my mom is here today, so I credit most of who I am to her. I also think about my commitment to community building and community organizing, and I think that came at an early age from my dad when he tells me the story of going around the houses around Franklin Park. We lived across the street from Franklin Park on Franklin Park South, and for those of you who've been in Columbus for a while, you remember a time where you used to be able to drive cars through the park. There was drugs and prostitution, and it's not the park it is today. And so he tells a story of pulling me in a wagon and going door to door to organize residents to get rid of some of those vices in the park. So I think my work around social justice and community building comes from some of that. But then professionally, I've been very blessed to have so many mentors, far too numerous to name. But I think we talk a lot about mentorship in this day and age, and I can't stress enough the importance of mentors, personal mentors, professional mentors. Even as I was growing up, being surrounded by my mom's friends and my dad's friends who loved me and supported me and encouraged me. And so when we talk about young people now, and the goal is for them to have one caring adult in their life, it baffles me that some of our young people don't have that. And so if I could just for this moment encourage folks in this room to really, if you're not already mentoring a young person, to take the time to do that, because it is a game changer for our young people. And we are all busy. We all have full calendars, full schedules, full lives, but we can all take at least an hour a week to mentor a young person. So if you're not doing that, I would challenge you to call Columbus City Schools, call City Year, call Big Brothers, Big Sisters, and just figure out how you can make that a part of your DNA if it isn't already, because that is how I have been shaped into who I am, and not always through formal programs, but I just can't underscore the importance of having people you can turn to in good times and in challenging times.
So making an impact, making change, Do you feel that you have changed Columbus in a small way or a big way, or is that something that's even on your radar screen?
I would like to think so. There are a couple of projects that have my fingerprints on them that I'm very proud of. One is an initiative on the Near East Side called PACT, Partners Achieving Community Transformation, and it was a entity that I helped birth with others, and it was really structured to plan the neighborhood around University Hospital East. So when I worked at Ohio State under the leadership of Karen Holbrook and then President Gee, Mayor Coleman and Charles Hillman, the president and CEO of the Housing Authority, came together and said, we as institutions who have a vested interest in this neighborhood really need to come together and plan for the neighborhood with the residents and also invest in the neighborhood. And so I had the opportunity to be the founding executive director of PACT. And so that's an effort that I'm very proud of that is helping shape a neighborhood here in our community. And I also have a commitment to the leadership development of young women. And so I've had the opportunity to be a founding board member of an organization called ROCKS, Ruling Our Experiences, which helps young women in a variety of middle schools and high schools really become the young women they're destined to become. And through the YWCA, I helped shape a program called the Gen Y Leadership Project, and I'm proud of that in working with young women, get connected to community service opportunities. Certainly my work at United Way I'm very proud of under the leadership of Janet Jackson, and that work is really all about reducing poverty in our community and building pathways to prosperity for families in our community. So those are 3 projects I'm proud of and I hope have made our city better as a result of my involvement and certainly the involvement of others.
Before we hear from the rest of you about whether you feel you've made a big impact, a big change, I'll tell you that in 5 minutes we'll be taking questions from you, the audience, as is our custom at the Columbus Metropolitan Club. So start thinking about what you want to ask these folks, and thank you in advance for no long editorial comments before you ask the question. So Deb.
The question is?
Do you feel that you've changed Columbus, or has Columbus changed you?
Well, Columbus definitely changed me, as I kind of alluded to earlier. I grew into an adult here, and I had a quick transformation in those early years, but it was a good transformation. And I don't know that I've changed Columbus. I don't know that any one person can, bring wholesale change. I've left many marks too, but I'd like to think that one mark that can be attributed to me is that when I was in Congress, I had friends on both sides of the aisle. I worked in a civil way. I had a tendency to want to get along, and I left Congress after 16 years with much of that legacy intact. And that's the way government should work, and I know that Mike Curtin believes that's the way government should work. And I think Columbus has a sense that that's how government should work. Whether I lent anything to how Columbus understands it or not, I hope I did, because I'm here to tell you, if there were more communities like the people in this room, America would be a lot stronger place. And I can't believe there's anybody here that doesn't believe that both political parties should do a better job of being civil and working together.
If I can just pick
Bob,
up on that for
yeah.
a second. And Don mentioned previously the best part about Columbus are the people. And we are a small town that grew up. But we still, I think, have people who care about each other.
Yeah.
My wife likes to say that we're the city that when you see somebody on the street or elsewhere and you say, "How are you?" you really wait to get the answer and you care. And I think one thing that we have here, or have had for going on 60, 70 years, is leadership in the public sector like few other cities. And when you start thinking about the mayors we have, going back to Mayor Sensenbrenner, who I think deserves the credit for Columbus being the Columbus that we are. If it weren't for Mayor Sensenbrenner, who back in 1954 decided he wasn't going to let us get hemmed in by the suburbs. And because of him, we have grown in all different directions. But you had Sensenbrenner, then he was followed by Tom Moody, just the opposite in temperament and personality. He went from Sensenbrenner, who was this real high energy guy, to a very cautious, quietly effective leader of a different party, and we went back and forth. But then we had Buck Reinhardt, who was again the dynamo, and I thought was a fabulous guy. I used to tell Buck he had 100 ideas, only 2 of them were worthwhile. But it's better to have those 2 than not to have any, right? And then I didn't mean you personally.
No.
And then after Buck, we had Greg. And then the longest-serving mayor, and Mike Coleman. But in all cases, they were extreme. And now, oh, excuse me. I hope Ginther's not watching this program. No, but Andy, who's great, and I had the privilege of being with him for a year or 2 on the school board. But we've had tremendous leadership, and they were all very popular. And you would be able to tell us probably the percentage of votes, but in many cases it was 60, 70% vote. We had strong support, both public and private, and those public-private partnerships have really helped make the city what it is.
Mike, jump
And I'm
in.
sticking to that story.
I came out of college like Deb in 1973, and in American journalism, that was a transformative time. It was Woodward and Bernstein, it was the summer Watergate hearings, it was an era of perestroika and glasnost, if you will, in American journalism, and I just, by the luck of timing, came out at that time. And it was a recessionary year, papers were not hiring, I was getting rejection slips from Ironwood, Michigan, of all sorts of godforsaken places. And then the Dispatch decided to take a chance on me, and so I hit the lottery, and my hometown paper was going to take a shot. And so I started there in a time when a lot of people who had a desire to change old institutions, and the Dispatch was an old institution. Lots of good people working there, but it needed perestroika and glasnost like so many papers did. Right. And Mary Yost, who's over there, I mean, she followed me by a couple of months at the Dispatch, and a lot of people collectively were given a chance to begin slowly but surely. I mean, nothing was dramatic and rapid, at the Dispatch, obviously, those of you who know the history. But over time, slowly but surely, a team of people that I was very fortunate to be part of, I think, elevated the paper to a different standard, and today it's unquestionably the best paper in the state. Unfortunately, the fortunes of papers are going downhill fast, which is another whole topic. But that opportunity to spend 38 years there and learn my city and expand my horizons and get rid of a lot of my old prejudices and narrow beliefs. I remember in 1976. Being able to persuade my editors to let me write a full-page Sunday feature on the emerging gay community in Columbus. That wouldn't have been done in 1966 or 1970, but in the mid-70s, I was allowed to write that piece, and I stayed in touch with a lot of those folks who were at the cutting edge, the coming out, if you will,
Absolutely.
Of the gay community in Columbus. And there are many, many opportunities that I was allowed, that I was afforded to do, and so I'd like to think I was a part of many dozens of people who helped change journalism for the better in Columbus, and certainly that experience changed me and allowed me to become a lifelong learner.
I think we're going to take questions now. Andy, you want to start off?
Happy to do the honor to ask the first question. Thank you. Thanks everybody for being here. I'm always entertained when I have the opportunity to bring somebody from outside of Columbus who hasn't been here before. Comes to mind my brother, a very conservative, quiet attorney, came with his wife a few years ago, and we got to take him to Doodah Parade, and they were just blown away by the free thinking and liberalism that was going on at Doodah. But if you'd each share maybe a story of somebody you've hosted from out of town that hadn't been here before and what their thoughts were on the city.
Deb, you want to start that?
Oh, that's a question? I thought-
That's a question.
A story about somebody that you've hosted from out of town, perhaps, who has been surprised, astonished, thrilled, impressed? You
Well,
want to think about that, or you?
Well, no, I'll just throw out what first came to mind. I brought Newt Gingrich to town once, and he loved the Columbus Zoo. I don't know if anybody remembers his visit here, but he was a real...
It reminded him of Congress?
Well, sort of that, but Kathy Kerr, I'm sure you remember those days. But he was the Speaker of the House then, and he was quite a lover of zoos. And that's another a singular star in our constellation here in Columbus is the zoo, and Newt really loved the zoo, so that's what popped in first. So that's, I guess, my answer.
Anybody else have a?
Yeah, people are always amazed when they come to Columbus and haven't been before. As I mentioned, I have a lot of friends on the East Coast, and so when they come and see how accessible our town is, how quickly you can get from point A to point B, and once they find out our cost of living, they are sold.
Yes, that's for sure. Mike, did you have a good
Our
one?
son married a woman from Japan, and her parents came to the U.S. for the first time for our daughter's wedding. Our son got married in Hawaii, so they had not come to Columbus. But when our daughter got married, our son's in-laws came all the way from Japan to spend a week in Columbus and stay at our house. And I got to escort them around Marble Cliff and say that this is Columbus. I lied a little bit, but they were impressed. They were impressed at how Columbus looked.
Bob, anybody that?
I would just say a lot of people are amazed about how this city is so spread out. Now, of course, we're all coming back into town, but people are amazed that you can go for maybe 10, 12 miles. You're still in Columbus from one side to the other.
Yeah.
So.
Just one other thing that comes to mind. People are always struck by the cleanliness of our city, and I think it's something we take for granted when you go to other cities. Columbus is a very clean city, and people comment on that as well.
Absolutely. We have another question.
Well, it's a history question. Tim, you were very tough to ask these very accomplished but all self-deprecating leaders of our community what they're most proud of that they left behind. So those of you who were here before me can tell me the story I hear, being at COSI, is that the flood wall had a certain champion in Congress called Deborah Pryce, who has made all of COSI and Franklinton all possible, that without that flood wall, we would not have that as the next hot spot. And COSI, Lord knows, would have already been flooded a few times probably by this point. So am I correct in that assumption?
That's correct. I joined forces with, thank you.
Really?
I joined forces with state, I think he was a rep at the time, Mike Stenziano, and it was a decade-long process, but we finally got it done. Thank you for remembering that, and it's nice to see a lot happening on that side of the flood wall now. We're all finally realizing how important it is to protect the west side from the ravages of floods that have stricken it before. And so, David, thank you.
Well, thank you. And as I'm heading out as CEO, whoops, glad I wasn't sitting over there. As I'm heading out as CEO, I'm trying to collect the history of the things that have affected COSI. I wanted to make sure I had that point correct, so thank you.
Yeah, you did. Thank you.
Yes, you did.
That's nice.
And Jane.
Jane Scott, I can't resist. I love to ask the question about defining moments. Was there a moment in your growing up, or maybe at the time in Columbus, where you knew you were in the right spot, you knew something was a turning point, that you got this indelible picture in your mind that you knew you would remember it forever? Defining moment.
Do you have one?
I'm seeing a lot of smoke coming out.
Let me tell you, it'd been great if we'd had the questions ahead of time. But I want to tell you about a moment that maybe it wasn't the defining moment, but a moment that was maybe one of the more inspirational moments. And this involves Buck Reinhardt, who I mentioned previously. An organization, Don mentioned many great organizations. I just like to say a word about I Know I Can, which was started when Dr. Jim Heyer, who was our superintendent, right after Joe Davis, who unfortunately passed away yesterday, was a great leader himself. But the moment came when Jim Heyer said, you know, we have all these great, bright students graduating from the Columbus schools, but unfortunately they can't afford to go to college. And that turned on the light for several of us, and we started I Know I Can. And if I can just take that one step further, Techie Shackelford, who has been the inspiration and the board chair since its formations over 25 years ago, she and I and several others got together and we were trying to raise $5 million, which we thought was a huge amount, as an endowment for our students to be able to go to college. And we decided we also needed government support. Buck Reinhardt was the mayor at that time. And Jerry Hammond was head of council. And for those of you who can remember, I know Mike can share this, those two guys fought like cats and dogs. I think there was a love-hate relationship. If Jerry said today was Friday, Buck would say, well, it's Saturday on the other side of the international date line or something. Anyway, they'd argue over everything. They didn't agree on anything. Well, Techie and I went to see them, and there was just the four of us in the room. And we decided ahead of time, we're trying to raise initially $500,000. Let's ask them for $150,000. And so very meekly, we said, do you think there's a chance? And Buck, as those of you know, jumped out of the chair and said, it's done. We will give you the $150,000. And Jerry Hammond's sitting there. He says, wait a second. That's a legislative act. We appropriate. We're going to give you the $150,000. So anyway, those were moments I remembered. And the two of them, even though they fought like crazy, they cared about our city. And I can just tell you the ending of the story. I'm proud to say I Know I Can is now the #1 college access program in the country. Every single Columbus school kid who makes a C average or better can go to college and not worry about finances. And again, I give credit to the board and to this community, which is another thing which I don't want to end this without saying one other attribute of our city is we're an extremely generous community. And we know that by all the different fundraisers from Pelotonia to Children's Hospital to you name it. So anyway, I want to get my last plug in.
We have one more question. I'd like to take this maybe in a little different direction. If there was one thing about Columbus that you could fix or improve or change, what would it be?
Mike?
I would try to work collectively with all of our private sector, public sector, nonprofit sector leaders to figure out how we are going to reintegrate our neighborhoods. Ever since court-ordered busing in the late 70s, even though we pulled that off better than most communities, we pulled it off without violence. You can't talk about Joe Davis and you can't talk about Mayor Moody. You can't talk about Bob Duncan without talking about what a splendid job Columbus did in pulling that off. But the result is, ever since then, we've had neighborhoods that are far, far too segregated. And if we could work to reintegrate people of all sorts of different socioeconomic classes into mixed-use neighborhoods. And there is some of that going on in Columbus now. We just need to figure out how to accelerate it so we aren't as polarized as we tend to be socioeconomically, not only in Columbus, but throughout the country. Columbus could pull that off where a lot of cities could not pull it off, in my view.
Dawn?
I would echo what Representative Curtin has said. Columbus is a city of opportunity and prosperity, but we know that prosperity has not reached all of our citizens and all areas of town. So that's one thing I would change about Columbus. And just one other quick thing I want to add. I'm a graduate of Columbus City Schools, Walnut Ridge in particular. And when I graduated from high school, Dr. Bob Weiler was a member of the Columbus Board of Education. And so a few years ago, I pulled out a picture, and it was Dr. Weiler giving me my high school diploma. So where else but Columbus can you receive a diploma from a Board of Education member who becomes a mentor and a friend? And so I just wanted to acknowledge that that just speaks to the kind of community that we have here.
Yeah.
And here's a little payback. I was a very innocent member of the COTA Board of Trustees and had a very outstanding leader named Don Tyler Lee, who was our board chair at the time. So Don's been in many different activities. I'd say that one thing I would change are those who complain because there are no mountains or oceans in Columbus. Get over it. We're not going to ever have those. And so
I don't know that trash pile south of town.
Well, it's not as high as a mountain, though, Tim. And appreciate what we've got. We've got the greatest city in the country. We're starting to be recognized outside of Columbus. We're the 6th or 7th hottest city. We're number one. Let's start realizing it.
I can't top that, but yeah, if you need an ocean, look at the Scioto Mile. If you need a mountain, go to the hilltop. You know, there's jewels among us, and we ought to just love us for who we are, because it doesn't get much better than Columbus, Ohio.
Amen.
Let's thank this panel once again for their great insights today. We're going to prepare to close the program. I'm going to ask you to raise your glasses or pick them up off the floor. We will toast to certainly 40 years of wonderful community conversation, and 40 forward is where we're headed. Cheers. We want to thank, as we close the program, our sponsor today, Plant Moran and the American Dairy Association Mideast. And certainly to this panel, Tim Feran, Don Tyler Lee, Deborah Pryce, Mike Curtin, and Robert Weiler. Thank you for being here. We'll see you again next week.